Today I have the incredible privilege of bringing you such a special man's story. He is a man that is larger than life, a man with a heart of gold, and someone that lives such a positive life after all he's faced. Today I bring you the story of Deo. Morning guys, welcome to Matches. Today I am joined by one of the most inspirational people I know. His name is Deo, and today we're going to hear a little bit about his story. It's so great to have you on the channel.
I'm very honored, cheese.
And I'm so excited to just chat to you and get to know a little bit about your story. And I really want people to know your story because I've heard a lot about it and it's really inspired me. So, Deo, why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing in life, where you are, your family, where you come from. It would be nice to know.
Sure. And Matt, firstly, is to be here with you and even with knowing your uncle and you being part of actually our lives and what it is and what makes life beautiful. I'm very honored to be on your show. Yeah, geez, I'm very, very happy. I hardly slept. I wanted to tease. It's a moment of my life. Now, I'm originally from Rwanda. I basically call myself one of the professional border jumpers and a nomad, if I may say, because my life as a child took me away from my so-called home. I remember my memory, because I was so young, starts actually really from Lake Victoria, and our little journey in a little boat to come here, and at the moment having the opportunity and being blessed, especially by my school, which I will tell you a little bit about, and this community I live in and the love I came into. And before I actually go on and tell you all about how I got here, is the first time I ever felt love was when I came to this country. I'm very honored to have actually been in South Africa and be part of the South African people. And so my personal story started when my dad, it's very hard to say this, when he passed away and we had to leave our little country, and our journey started without choice. We didn't choose to take this journey on. It was circumstances. But I always take it and I say it was meant to be. It was maybe the journey I was supposed to do and supposed to go with. And from Rwanda, we jumped the border. As I say, I'm a professional border jumper. Started at the age of about 8.
Sure.
And we went into Uganda, and we never were looking for a home to settle. We were the war refugees. We didn't really know where we were going. My mom, bravely enough, I had her in my life at that particular time, and with my younger brothers and my little auntie, we all flew together and took on the journey, and we went through Uganda, and we stayed in a little, I can't even call it a little house, it was a little reed house, and the mosquitoes used to give us a great bitings at night. I think, my blood was pretty sweet, because as you can see, I'm a little bit overweight, so I always got sweet nectar. And from there, we partook a journey through Lake Victoria in a canoe to the Tanzanian side. And
was that your whole family?
With my whole family.
Sure.
But I wouldn't have made it here. We almost drowned.
Sure.
The canoe. I remember the canoe shaking, and I couldn't swim.
Sure.
And it was one of always my phobias of water, and I always wanted to know and learn how to swim. And from that's where I can tell my story from the beginning of it. That's when I realized, oh my God, we've taken on a journey. We're not in our own depth. We now have to fight for ourselves and fight to survive. I had to grow up very young. I had to be a man. Very young, and I don't wish it on any kid. It also taught me that children shouldn't grow up so quickly. They should be allowed to play, allowed to run around. So that part of my life was stolen away, but also it was the story of Africa, and I think it's still the story of Africa now.
Sure.
And then we went through to Zambia. Zambia was very tough for me. That was the toughest.
Why is that?
When we got, they threw us, we went into a refugee camp. They didn't have proper accommodation. I think that was the beginning for me not liking or having a distaste for refugee camps, because it makes you feel unhuman. It makes you feel different. And the reason why we had to leave Zambia was because my brother had sickle cell anemia, and my brother Peter. It's a miracle that he's still alive to this day.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's 25 years old now.
Sure.
Naughty as hell. So we had to leave for the medical reason of him, and he couldn't be looked after there, and also there was no food. It was hunger. It was the biggest hunger, but also my next part of my journey and where my story came, and maybe what made me who I am today and the way I think and the way I believe, was when we went to Namibia. Our journey to Namibia, we had to go through a park. So there were lions, there were game rangers there, and then we basically, my mother, she's a very brave woman. She walked around, got to know the locals, and she met a young lady. I don't even know her name. I forgot her name. I was so young, and befriended her. And by chance, she had a boyfriend on the Namibian side of the border.
Sure.
And she told my mom, by the way, my mother's name is Aurelia. She told my mother that I'm going to see my boyfriend in 2 days' time. Then I can show you the route which we take and how to nurse the lions. There's a few people had been eaten by lions through that park itself. And it's very tough. Sorry, it's very tough. And when we got to the Namibian side, there was a police van running, and we all scattered. And we ran into. I got separated from my mom. I was somewhere in some swamp somewhere, and so it took us about 30 minutes, 40 minutes to find each other again. Namibia was a very tough country at that particular time, if I may say. They weren't too kind towards refugees, and I think as most worlds, they're not really too kind to the poor and the lowest of the lowest.
Yeah.
So in Namibia, we had to give ourselves up, because if you didn't give yourself up and they found you were in big trouble. So we were arrested in Namibia. So we spent a month in prison before they moved out to a city camp. We were very lucky my mom and myself and my siblings were very lucky that they kept us in the police office. And my memory of the police office was one day there was a South African gentleman. He had been caught for stealing. I don't agree what we did with him, and they were whipping him. And I woke up to this man's screams while the Namibian police are busy whipping him.
Sure.
And I could see this man's pain, and that's for me. And they were wearing blue uniforms, and I started to struggle a long time with that, because I had a phobia with the police. I had a phobia with the man in blue, because of what I saw that particular time. And so that's one of my experiences I had, and affected me later. So from there we were moved to a city refugee camp, which for me was hell on earth. We were dumped somewhere in the middle of the desert. It was terrible. We were cramped in a room together. But the beautiful side of things, I got to meet Angolan children. I got to learn how to speak Portuguese, which I wish I could still speak. So I got to learn about people. And that was a beautiful part for me. I'm telling you as open as it is, the way I felt in my young mind.
Yeah.
And the city was tough. It was very tough. At the age of 9, I learned to grow my own little veggie garden. But the toughest part was when they took my mom away. And my mom, I stayed in a city camp for 2 months, looking after my younger brother, who was at that moment about 1 year old. And I was a 9-year-old here looking after my younger brother. And that's most of my anger came towards Namibia, and how they took my mom away. And I remember I made some little food for her, and I took it where they were locking her up, and the guy chased me away. I clearly remember that to this day. And that was probably one of the toughest moments, even tougher than my dad died. Yeah, even tougher. Because I think I started to realize what life was. And I don't believe in people being sorry for themselves, because yes, you're allowed to be sorry for yourself for a little bit, but life is meant to be tough, so it makes you better, and you must always take the positives, so you learn that you don't treat people the same way. You know, when you're down and low, you actually become a professional beggar too.
Yeah.
You know how to beg, and my mother, I think, begged a little bit of money and managed to get us out. The process of getting out of Namibia and to come into this country, And you know, it would sound actually crazy the way we came into this country, because that time in 1993, coming to South Africa wasn't like now when you can just walk over the Limpopo River.
Yeah.
I think the borders are more open. Now you just wait at the right time, you walk over the Limpopo River in South Africa.
And you would have been afraid then, eh?
Yeah,
You've been jumping.
Yeah, no, I've been jumping a long time. I don't think these guys will catch me, even if I'm very fat. So no, and then we came through with them. They smuggled us across the border, and we got about 4 kilometers before we got the South African border. Excuse me. We stopped. It was broad daylight. Jumped into the back of the tanker, and I remember when we were coming to the South African border, you could hear the guys talking, you could hear the dogs, you could hear all the commotion, and here my younger brother starts to cry.
Sure.
So we had to grab his mouth, and I know it sounds bad, but we had to that time. Otherwise, I'd been busted.
Yeah.
And we had a lady with us, immaculate, who had tried, I think, like 7 times.
Sure.
And she's never got in. And because my mom was a brilliant thinker. She thought out of ideas of how to get us to safety. And so then we came through that oil tanker, another 4 kilometers in South Africa. We jumped out, and that was our beginning to freedom. And my first sign of Cape Town was Athlone, that tower.
Towers.
Yeah, that was my first sight. We came here in the evening.
Sure.
Yeah, that was my first sight. I've never ever seen such a beautiful city. Sure. When I came and I saw the lights, in my young mind, and I saw how beautiful this country was, and I saw the people, and I saw the organization. How organized. I think sometimes when people, when they live in South Africa, they're so quick to blame. But other African countries is like hell on earth. It's disorganized, the cities stink. I'm not trying to be rude towards, but I'm just trying to say the positive through my young mind at that particular time. And after 6 months, our status was given to us then 1993 by the apartheid government as refugees.
Sure.
Yeah, and I got to go to school. My first school was in Boree Cross. That's where I started. I was actually years behind. I couldn't, they pushed me through there. I couldn't grasp, I couldn't spell, I couldn't do anything. But before my whole thing, and seeing South Africa and seeing the elections, and I always thought when I was younger, we used to see the movie Sarafina, and that's what we thought of South Africa was that the people were being bullied, and I got to see the freedom. And I got to see what Mandela preached. Mandela is a great hero. He showed that through kindness, forgiveness, and if you move on and also sacrifice for the greater good. And put your personal feelings one side and focus what is the feelings of the whole. And for me, that really touched me. And a little bird, I think it was a dove with a little peace plant in its mouth. And I still remember, South Africa, we love you.
If you want to hear more, continue to part 2 of Deo's story.